In April of 2020, the United Nations Deputy Secretary General Amina J. Mohammed launched Women Rise for All to bring together influential women leaders from around the globe to share how their leadership is shaping the COVID-19 response and what it will take to build back better. Tune in now to learn more. In April 2020, the United Nations Deputy Secretary General Amina J. Mohammed launched Women Rise for All to bring together influential women leaders from around the globe to share how their leadership is shaping the COVID-19 response and what it will take to recover and accelerate SDG implementation. And we are so incredibly lucky that here today to tell us more about the initiative is the Deputy Secretary General herself. Welcome, DSG.
Hi, how are you, Nadira? Great to see you.
Great to see you. Perhaps we could start with the idea itself. What was the genesis of Women Rise for All, and how did that vision get realized?
I think really it was about us being in not a good place as we were trying to cope with COVID, unprecedented experience for everybody. And in that crisis, it seemed that the voices and the actions were actually being done by women leaders. And every now and again, you'd see these headlines in the papers which would say, it's the women that are doing it. And I was also looking back at, the United Nations itself and the Secretary General saying gender parity. And then I was looking at the leaders in the United Nations, and women were standing up and they were leaning forward. And so I thought, wow, so if men are doing it, they get the headlines. And so how do we get women in the headlines? Not because we're just talking about gender parity and how important it is and we're advocating for the goal, but we're seeing it in action. And that we could actually put the faces behind the numbers that we say are either prime ministers or presidents or CEOs or heads of civil society coalitions, or as you will see this week, our permanent representatives. So it was really to bring their voice, bring their persona, show what it is that makes them tick and why they do what they do, their pathway. And we also wanted to go beyond the event. So that people could follow them online and to see what they were doing. And at the end of the day, it's about inspiration, isn't it? It's about getting to that one person who's saying, so what can I do? And those that will come along and stand on our shoulders, just as we've stood on many others.
Are there any moments that have been particularly inspiring for you as the initiative has come together that have been surprising, or things that you just thought, wow, this is exactly why we're doing this?
That they said yes. That women said yes, that they would come and do this because they were so important and they had so many things to do, and everyone said yes, and they were really very excited about it. And so that for me was just amazing because, what else? What else do you want? I mean, they could have been busy, which they are, but they made that space to help us show not just what they were doing, but to inspire others. And yeah, so that for me is the most memorable, the yes.
It's so special, but it's also not that surprising to me as a woman. And it makes me think, President Ellen Johnson Sirleaf earlier this week said to us that women are great leaders, and particularly in crisis, because of some things that we do intuitively, because of empathy, because of our instinct to care and to nurture. And I wonder if you could talk a little bit about why you think women leaders have been so successful in this pandemic situation, relatively speaking, and what we're bringing to the table, including that spirit of yes, that actually makes us uniquely suited for these sorts of situations.
I think somehow it's probably in our DNA, but we automatically think of everyone, right? Your family is everyone. And so you're always looking to make sure no one's left behind. It just comes. We are also able to multitask. So we can think about a lot of things, but also keep focus on the goal. Mm-hmm. And I think that that's very helpful in a time of crisis when people are looking for direction, but they're also looking to see that, what about me? And we're always about that. And so I think that we have those skill sets that come with the package, and I don't think that we have often given them value because we've been trying to do something that the man does. Well, they need to do something that women do because it would make them so much better at it. And often I when people talk to me about climate change, and we all say it's man-made, and I said, yes, if there were more women in it, we wouldn't have had the catastrophes that we have. We wouldn't have been polluting like we do, because we would have thought about the implications and the consequences. I also think that we're solution-oriented. we look for the solutions, because we know what the implications are, and that's not an option. And I think that when a crisis comes up, that's exactly what we do. We put all the pieces together and we move. Great team players at the community level. You see that in every single community, whether it is your family and the extended family, or it is actually that community, the village, where it is always women gathering together to share the work. And even if it's tough, like you have to walk. I remember, talking about the women had to walk for 10 kilometers to go get water and come back. And then we were saying, well, that's really terrible. So let's put let's give them the water, the borehole in their village, so they don't have to walk the 10 kilometers. And they said, you didn't discuss that with us, because on that journey, there are a lot of things that we discuss that solve our problem that we can't do when we're back there. So you would have asked us where we wanted that borehole. So, to assume that it's just the suffering, it is, but it is also that we make the best out of every situation that we have. And so, yeah, we are incredibly gifted. It is I think, for us to push forward that these are some of the skills that we have that can be honed. We need equal access to education and honing those skills, not just a place at the table, but in leadership. And I think that we also need to be reframing. So beyond Women Rise, we also brought in the economists, because we were talking about the financial architecture of the world, and it's upside down, it's not working, it's not inclusive, it's broken. And there were suddenly these women talking about it. So there were women leading that were economists, but didn't have a voice. And so I think bringing those on, and knowing that you can buck the trend, that you can flip the orthodoxy on these things, and it is women doing it. I think it should bring a sense to the world that that's why we need equality, that it has to be women and men. So it's not just saying, move aside men. No, it's saying you need to have this handshake that allows us to do things in collaboration.
And it is in your interest. It is in the entire world's interest. But I would love for you to reflect a little bit on that, because there is this sort of binary approach to the conversation some of the time. And I think a lot of what needs to happen, and what I'm happy to see sometimes happening right now, is that we are not just talking about women in one silo and men in one silo. We are trying to talk about what do we both bring to the table, and how can we sort of cross-pollinate. So what are the things that we can do as women to help male leaders, or men in general, sort of understand these qualities that are helping us to be successful in this environment, and to maybe start to emulate some of them more effectively?
Well, I think the first thing we need to be doing is talking about we.
Yeah.
Because I think there's too much I, and I is important, but we gets us further. I think we also have a healthy respect that we're not wired the same way. Every individual is wired differently, but men and women are wired differently, and there are some differences with men and women as well in their own gender. But if we understand that, we begin to have a healthy respect of what each one brings to the table. And I think that that's where men need to have more respect for what we bring to the table. I think we have to have more understanding of why they are like they are, and not just put them in a box. Yeah. I think we have, both sides have to work at it a little bit. But I'm coming to the conclusion slowly that unless we are working together to solve the solutions, we won't appreciate what each other has to bring to the table. And yes, often people will say, well, only one person can fit through the door, so who's the leader? It's whoever the best person is at that particular moment in time to step through the door. And I think that that's what we have to come. It's not either or. It should be put your best foot forward. Is it male or is it female or otherwise? And let's do that. So yeah.
And it's so obvious, right? But it also bears repeating, because it's not what we do all the time. It's sort of, we stand at the bottom of the stairs and just think, you first, me first. Like
no, common sense is not so common. So we actually have to state it and work at it, and ask those uncomfortable questions. I think that for years, because we've been in the battle, the feminist movement has been fighting to get to it, and we were 25 years since Beijing. And I think that sometimes we will get lost in the fight. And I think that you have to pause and step back and then move forward. And we're at that moment right now. And it may be that COVID is the pause, gives us time for reflection, about how a bird will only fly on 2 wings. And right now it's 1 and a bit. And we just need to make sure that bird has got 2 wings, and that's women at the table, women in everything.
I love that. I have to keep myself from cheering while you're talking because I don't want to jump over your audio. But yes, to every single bit of that. I want to talk a little bit about that, this pandemic environment and the space for reflection that it's created, because we've seen activism evolve so much. And I don't think it's an accident that some of it has happened very concurrently with this pandemic time that we've been in. But that's had an interesting effect, I think, as you look at younger activists, because there's so many more resources, but I don't always know that we and they know necessarily how to use them to the greatest effect, especially because they are not just trying to talk to each other, they're trying to talk to you and to your peers. And so I wonder if you could talk a little bit about that, like how in this environment should young activists and activists in general be approaching their cause and using the tools that are available to them to greatest effect?
Well, we're learning something very new. I mean, as we say, the business continuity plan of the United Nations is that we must stay open to do what we do best. We in the UN, we convene, we get people talking. People come to the United Nations, maybe you learn something, you bring a frustration, you have a voice. Sometimes you go away the solution, sometimes you don't, and it might take you 10, 15 years to resolve a conflict and peace happens. Or there is development. Whatever it is, we had to find a new way of communicating, and COVID put us online. And I think that was perhaps one of the most difficult things, was for we as the United Nations staff to keep business open in our country teams and our agencies online. It was new to us as well, going home to have to share a space where there was no division between work and life. So it brought up all the challenges there that we shared. But I think more importantly, we had to start reaching out and suddenly finding this democratic space that I didn't have to get on a plane. I could move from room to room. I could invite people in. I could be far more innovative in how I reach out to those that want to talk to me and have those conversations. And they don't necessarily have to be 4 hours. 1 hour conversations, 1 hour conversations. It is taxing, but it has brought a lot of color and life into the discussion. And I think it's begun to show us in the UN at 75 that we've got this transition that we're supposed to be having. It's called an intergenerational one. And it's about young people. It's going to be about cities. It's going to be about technology. And there are many things that, many people are anxious about. They don't know if they've got a job tomorrow or how long they're going to be in lockdown. And when the world opens up, what will it look like? So those things use this space to continue to connect. With the people who, I remember talking to our entertainment friends, many of them are our partners. Richard Curtis has done this amazing broadcast with us, and saying to them, how do you take the show into people's homes?
It's so interesting that you mention communication, because I'm struck in this environment again by how exposed it sometimes makes people feel. And you are a beautiful communicator, but not everybody is. I often say that brilliant people aren't always brilliant communicators, but that doesn't mean that they can't be made or taught to communicate brilliantly. And I wonder if you could talk a little bit about that in this space where you can feel so exposed. You're speaking often from your own home and you're being captured on camera, and it's so strange because there's not actually a person in front of you. There sort of is in some cyber space way. How do we bring our whole selves to these kinds of conversations and actually be willing to be more authentic and more vulnerable and more honest?
I think the first thing you have to do is think about the conversation you're about to have. You need to get your headspace there. Every one of us struggles with this every single day. I'm coming on and it's, okay, it's Nadira. What am I going to say to her? What's the conversation supposed to be about? And then it's not supposed to be scripted. So you have to get your headspace into what it's going to be about. And then, dig deep, because if you use your own story, you will connect, and it will happen on screen that you are appealing to people. You're authentic. People see authenticity. They also see script. And when you're reading something and they know that's not quite you. So I think that's what we've all struggled with. We continue to do so. I still have to talk to myself to go out on stage. I think it's worthwhile you saying, people always say you did really well. And then you say, really? So tell me what I could improve on. And then they'll say, well, if you could have done just a little bit of this. So find those people that you can hear the truth from, and pose the question before, your imagination runs away with you.
And believe in goodwill a little bit, because people want you.
People love it. People love to see people talk about real issues. There's always people rooting for you when they can see that, there's embarrassment or you're struggling. No one looks at it like, oh, that's really, that's not good. No, people lean in. And I think everybody's finding this a new space. And there's no perfect.
Yeah, there is no perfect. And so just our last question, as we have a minute or two to go, what advice would you give to the next generation, from you straight to them?
Well, remembering where I was when they were young, go for it. Don't take no for an answer. Be really focused. Remember, it's a journey, and you just put your best foot first each step of that journey. And remember the people along the journey, because you will often come back to them 10 years later, 20 years later. You don't know where you find them. So remember the people along the journey, and leave the room well. Leave it with a smile, leave it with goodwill, leave it with a message. And I think, then you're fulfilled. Then I think you feel like, okay, I did the best I could at the point of time I was there, and I can go forward.
I'm so pleased to say that we have some beautiful videos to share with all of you, all the folks out there in the SDG Action Zone. They'll give us some highlights of the Women Rise for All initiative, present messages from members of the Circle of Women Ambassadors to the United Nations, as well as some very special letters you will not want to miss. Now, I've said before that I'm a DSG super fan, and there are a million reasons why, as there should be. But I suppose the most important one is that you and women like you embody a level of self-assuredness that is just deeply inspiring, because it rejects all notions of all preconceived notions and moves through the world believing it can be all things without fear of contradiction from the outside or the inside. So I guess if I were to write a letter of thanks to you, and I hope it's not too presumptuous to do that, I would write it to you and to my mother, to Jane Fonda and Judi Dench, to Michelle Obama, and the dearly departed and now sorely missed Ruth Bader Ginsburg, to say thank you for showing us, women and men, a vision of womanhood that is just unapologetically whole. There is literally no metric that can capture the vastness of the impact that that has had on me and all of us. So thank you, thank you, thank you for that and for being here. And we can't wait to see you next year in the SDG Action Zone again. And now we get to see a little bit more about Women Rise for All. Thank you so much, DSG, and we'll see you next
Thank you.
I rise for human rights, and I rise for all vulnerable and voiceless people.
Because the virus does not discriminate, but the social structures of the world do.
For peoples and for planet.
Because there's only one human family, only one planet, only one ecosystem.
For all the young people who are frontline healthcare workers.
Because I fundamentally believe that universal healthcare could transform the world.
We rise for people everywhere.
Because we must ensure that the coronavirus pandemic does not wipe out any progress that has been made in recent years towards greater gender equality.
Welcome and thank you for joining us as we launch the first global event, which is building on our social media launch a month or so ago. Today, we're meeting as governments discuss the impact of COVID-19 and the Sustainable Development Goals at the high-level political forum, and on what we can do to really try to minimize the worst impacts and get back on track to get those goals done by 2030. The pandemic, as we all know, is an unprecedented health and human crisis. But as we all know too, emergencies, crises also provide us with opportunities. Over the past few months, people around the world have come to see what many of us already know. Women's leadership has made a profound difference.
I've found myself in a difficult position very often because much of what I say at the personal level is in fact now reflected for small states, because the same dichotomy with respect to rights and relationships and power exists not just at the individual level, but also at the level of states. And to that extent, I've found myself over the last 2 years trying to speak on behalf of small states, trying to recognize that as we navigate our way through this global community, we cannot continue to have a set of states that are seen and heard and others that are not. We begin to question the injustice of the relationship, the injustice of the organizations that deem one set superior and another inferior. And I use that language not in any contentious way, but as part of our reality that we face every day. Over the course of this pandemic, I've found myself having to communicate across the Caribbean, reminding persons that our duty is to stay focused on mission. And what is the mission? that we want to create a people who are committed, who are creative, who are conscious, who equally are caring. And that we do so not because of the circumstances that we want to have, but we do so against the backdrop of our reality. What is practical, and what is it that allows us to move people to the next level? We therefore have come to this point in time conscious that the convergence of climate and COVID, I seem to become consumed with all of the C's today. Climate and COVID have created this unique opportunity for us to take our people and lift them to the next level. How? The most important asset that any young person moving into society needs is the ability to care.
The COVID pandemic has shaken us, uprooted us, and could have left us imprisoned by fear. But it is women at all levels that have come together to say that this shaking, this uprooting must be used to build a better and fairer world, where the new roots will be intertwined with compassion and care. We are not only saying build back better, we are saying this time build differently. Women Rise for All is what women usually do, inclusion and not exclusion. And that is the critical difference. Many have spoken of the vulnerabilities and inequalities which have been revealed as a result of the pandemic. Those living life on the narrow and impoverished margins of great prosperity were saying, we may be in the same sea, but we are definitely not in the same boats. But they were unheard. The majority of those in the leaking and unsafe boats are women, young and old. This year was supposed to be the time when attention would be focused on the progress or the lack thereof of 20 years of Security Council Resolution 1325. It is still the time to do this, and it is definitely the time to push forward on the SDGs for the decade of action. The SDGs have been made even more relevant, and now all can see the need for their universal application.
No one alive today has ever faced a global health crisis on the scale of COVID-19.
This is a moment that unites us.
Join forces to build a world that is better for this generation and the future ones.
If we rise for all.
For a healthier, safer world, gender-responsive climate action is crucial.
If we protect the nature, nature will protect us back.
Let us see more women in roles of leadership.
Ask yourself, where do you hold power and privilege, and how can you leverage that power and privilege to open the door for somebody else?
We need to act now and secure a fair and just future for all women and for all people and for the planet.
Today, we are seizing this moment to bring greater visibility to the incredible and effective women's leadership that the world has seen and benefited from over these past few months. And that's what Women Rise for All is about, to seek out amazing women at the global or local level who are realizing the values of the United Nations in the work that we do every day. We want to amplify those voices in solidarity for the benefit of all. And we want to shape the way we define leadership, ensure that we emerge from this pandemic with women leading in equal numbers and equal partnership. Today is also about leadership across generations. The young women joining us are not the leaders of tomorrow, they're the leaders of today. We need to commit not just to stand with them, but to accompany them, sharing our skills, our experience, our expertise to support their vision.
This crisis has brought to light an undeniable truth that the leadership of women is essential for us to effectively recreate the world. And I want to insist, recreate the world that is more human-centered, that is more equal, a world in which such social justice is the goal. So we must mobilize ourselves to leverage the richness of our diversity, young and old. Women in rural villages and bustling cities with varied skill sets and professions, and from different political, ethnic, or religious leanings, are all needed to reshape our world. Women and women's leadership must be at the center of the COVID response, and especially in reconstruction efforts at all levels. And not just the heads of state level, but everyone must be involved. Every single one of us here today, within our homes, within our communities, within our boardrooms, and even in our legislative halls, we must all agitate for a different way of living, a different way of doing things. It is time for women to step up and rise for all, as the Deputy Secretary General is calling us to do. We as women are uniquely placed to lead a societal redesign. It is not about to change. I believe it is, in fact, to stop and re-examine the precipice in which human family was just before the COVID struck in. We are all to be here to demand and create transformation which is necessary. I'm saying transformation, not change. Transformation which is necessary so that our world is driven by human interest and not market interest. We must live on a planet where materialism, greed, inequalities no longer divide the human family. I challenge us all to lead by example and treat our fellow citizens with equal respect and worth, regardless of race, class, gender, ability, and economic standing.
The Sustainable Development Goals must be our compass.
International cooperation and human rights, both our response and recovery efforts, must be centered and focused on human rights.
Rooted in valuing everybody equally.
Led by inclusive multilateralism and compassion for each other.
In our global village, solidarity is the only option.
We must therefore focus on solutions to attack systemic barriers that reinforce inequality.
We can do it working together, but we need to respect each other, to see each other, to hear each other, and to work together.
I think all of the leaders, all of the women who are rising up and are lending their voice and are speaking up, are doing it from an innate place of individuality and their own unique response to what's happening.
Yeah.
I think that's what makes us the
very
leaders that we.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I was saying also remembering that, like, you know, again, don't let people's expectations of who you're supposed to be as a woman stifle you, because there's a reason you're here at this particular time. There's a reason you weren't born 100 years ago, and there's a reason you weren't born 100 years from now. You know, like right now is when you are needed.
You're broken down and tired of living life on a merry-go-round, and you can't find a fighter. But I see it in you, so we're gonna walk it out and move mountains up. We're gonna walk it out and move mountains. silence isn't quiet, and it feels like it's getting hard to breathe. Then I know you feel like dying, but I promise we'll take the world to its feet and move mountains, bring it to its feet and move mountains. And I rise like the day I will rise up, spite of the ache, I'll rise up, and I do it 1,000 times again for you. We have each other, and for that we have each other. Yeah, we will rise, we will rise, we'll rise. I'll rise up, I like the ways I will rise. In spite of the ache, I'll rise 1,000 times again. And we'll rise up, I like the ways we will rise up. In spite of the ache, we'll rise up, and we'll do it 1,000 times again for you.
We've been challenged and called to action. Now's the moment for us to be bold, to be radical, to be courageous, transformative, attack the issues that are systemic, that need transformation, both for people at the center, but also remembering our environment, the planet, our home. So we do have a decade of action. This is the first of those years as we count down to 2030. Be bold, get out onto the streets, and let's start marching towards the Sustainable Development Goals.
To all the women permanent representatives of the United Nations, my amazing sisters, thank you for the wisdom and diplomacy you bring to the multilateral table, and the leadership and inspiration you bring to the world. In the midst of this crisis, our shared focus on people, peace, and the planet gives me hope every day. And your collective determination and courage give me strength.
Dear President Robinson, 30 years ago, you became the first woman President of Ireland. Your election was a remarkable moment for Ireland, and of course, particularly for the women of Ireland, as we say in our own language, Manana Heron, who had been waiting far too long to see a woman leader bring influence and bring wisdom to the top level of our nation's politics. To paraphrase your own well-known words, instead of rocking the cradle, you rocked the system with the help of Irish women voters, of course. Now, 30 years later, and even in these most challenging times, you continue to be a source of strength and inspiration to succeeding generations of aspiring leaders, not just in Ireland, but right across the globe.
My dear mother, you have been my role model from the very beginning. You taught me how to focus, how to manage my life, how to listen to the voices of the people in need, how to be kind and polite, still determined. And yes, you have prepared me for the times of the pandemic, because your values are with me every day. The commitment, the respect, the independence, and the resilience.
Dear sister, women have carried a heavy burden during the pandemic, with responsibilities both in society as well as at home. Your commitment as a leader and an inspirer with foreign policy that gives a voice to all these female actors is as important as ever. We cannot afford to exclude 50% of the world's population. We must all make sure that we all as human beings have the same rights, resources and representation. I know you will never give up this goal, and we are with you.
My dear sister Minister Amina J, you're playing an eminent role in the fight against the global pandemic. It's exactly the time we need each other the most, to keep going. Entrusted with the people's well-being, you remain inspiration to women everywhere. As James Kawakiaga, the UNDP resident representative, said, Eritrea's ability to flatten the curve may be largely due to the country harnessing its social capital. He's so right. Social trust remains the source of our resilience as a people. Please continue to be the amazing leader you are.
Dear Lisa, my message is for you, because young women like you not only shape the future, you define the now. Because your decision to be the youth representative for sexual reproductive health and rights in challenging times and at a young age inspires me, as I'm sure it does others. Because as a youth representative, your voice about the importance of sexual reproductive health and rights for the empowerment of young women will be heard. And because you amplify voices that say sexual and gender-based violence is not acceptable, never, under any circumstances.
To future female leaders and women human rights defenders, 2020 has presented us with unique challenges, big and small. From the closing of schools to missed birthdays and celebrations, and even the loss or illnesses of loved ones. As we begin to reimagine our lives and open up our communities, now is the time to make a change for the better, to make our recovery based upon values, not value. And there is important work to be done by each and every one of us, in our homes, our schools, and communities to build a more just, equal, and sustainable world.
To the incredible women on the front line of the COVID-19 pandemic, the nurses, the doctors, the essential workers, those of you taking care of children and the elderly, this message is for you. The events of this year have strained and challenged us all. The pandemic has deepened existing fissures and created new ones. But our greatest trials also bring out the best in us. I've seen that firsthand over the past 7 months, and I am in awe of you. You give me hope for the future. You have paved the way for other women and girls to succeed. You have made sacrifices so that we remain safe, and so that we can build a better world when we finally put this pandemic behind us. You are an inspiration for us all, and we have been cheering for you every single day, and will continue to support you. From all of us in the United Arab Emirates and in the UAE mission to the United Nations, thank you for everything you do.
We need them to be focused on the Sustainable Development Goals, on human rights, and bring in humanistic values and ethics. The collective effort has a precious tool, education for girls, for women. This is a crucial moment. I would like to encourage Audrey Azoulay on her leadership in UNESCO, along with teachers, professors, mentors for recovering better.
Dear young women and girls, your empowerment is a key to breaking the vicious cycle of poverty and violence. Your education is the answer to building better and sustainable future. Your leadership and vision will bring the change we all want and need, and you can count on our support.
To all girls and women of all ages and in all their diversity, this message is for you. I know that sometimes you believe that we are in difficult times, and that it has not been easy to get where you are now. Being a strong woman often means you carry a heavy weight and a large burden in your shoulders. However, a strong and empowered is the kind of woman who says, "No, you're wrong." That is the kind of woman who says, "Yes, I can," to every single thing she wants, no matter how crazy or absurd or improbable, and she won't stop until she gets it. This word needs that you believe in yourself, and even when that path is covered with doubts and challenges and you're not sure you can find your way, you have to trust in your capacity, in your decisions, in your dreams and goals, and believe that you can do anything you set your mind and heart to. Don't even feel ashamed about your strength, independence, and power. Instead, keep your head high and shoulders strong, and always be true to yourself. Never stop being your bold, brilliant, and beautiful self. Never forget that this world belongs to you.
Together,
we are stronger.
We are stronger
when women
Rise.
Rise for all.
In solidarity.